Hello, this is Lynn Shea.
And Peter Wakefield.
And today we're discussing the chart, the horoscope and the natal chart of JK Rowling, author of the famous Harry Potter series of books and now made into films. And JK Rowling was born the 31st of July 1965 in Gloucestershire, and we have 7 degrees of Scorpio rising for her, and we have her sun in Leo with her moon in Virgo. And the first thing perhaps we ought to address here, Peter, is the fact that there is a T-square between the moon, Jupiter and Saturn in the 11th, 8th and 5th houses in Virgo, Gemini and Pisces. And what I see here is detailed recreation from small or fantasy-like worlds or imagination, and that this is actually born of some kind of lack or poverty.
Yes.
Do you want to comment on that?
Anywhere where there's a T-square in the chart is a major challenge for that person, because of the nature of the angles of the planets to each other. It means there's a clash or an antipathy of energies between the archetypes of those energies. So what does that mean in human terms? What it means is there's often, with Saturn opposing the moon, there can be repressed or inhibited reactions and responses to certain things, depending on where the houses are and what house positions they are.
And it is a retrograde Saturn as well, so it's fears thrown forward.
Yeah.
And the 5th house, they're going to have to be worked out through loved ones or through self-expression and creativity.
With Jupiter being the square to both the moon and Saturn, and
in Jupiter as well, in Gemini, as well.
Which is the writing.
It is, and
sign.
It is.
It's going to, what that Jupiter in Gemini purports to do for me is to bring the benefits of exteriorizing those talents as a writer, but at the same time being challenged by this opposing energy of the moon and Saturn, which means that there is opposition to perhaps parental opposition or domestic situations that pose a crisis to that full expression of Jupiter in Gemini. Jupiter doesn't do well in Gemini, actually.
Well, having said that, I know a hell of a lot of people with Jupiter in Gemini who become particularly well known. I mean, no, it's scattered. Jupiter in Gemini is famously quite scattered and gathers from a very eclectic source. But it's on its own, the Saturn Gemini Jupiter would be a square, and it would talk about inhibition. So there's inhibition around. I think this person has had or does have hard time in intimate matters, because there's an inhibition around intimacy and around love and a fear.
And don't you think, Lynn, with moon in Virgo, there's a tendency to get lost in detail?
Yes, definitely detail. The detail is Virgo moon, and the thoroughness of detail and the describing of small detail, and the Jupiter in Gemini is putting it into a much larger picture. And the Saturn in Pisces is dealing with the fear of the unknown, or even fear of death, and bringing these usually quite taboo subjects, which Harry Potter is very dark, almost adult fairy tale, because it deals with the occult in a way which is palatable and appeals to across the board to all ages.
Yes, there's an antipathy there of energies between light and dark, and it's
Scorpio rising is
dramatised in this fantasy fashion, isn't it?
Scorpio rising is always going to have to excavate from the dark and bring into the light that which is not. It's frightened of. And there are 2 signs which deal in, if you like, the dark or beyond the veil or the unknown or death, and both Scorpio and Pisces for different reasons. Pisces has no fear of death, it's said. However, Saturn in Pisces retrograde here would suggest there's a fear of of what happens after death, or of losing people to death.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of JK Rowling's storylines are very dark, and they're quite sinister, or they're quite malicious in
yeah,
their characters are malicious.
Yes, I would agree with that. It's interesting to note that Saturn in Pisces is perhaps karma of religious origin,
Yes.
going back to previous
Most
lives.
definitely,
And-
almost medieval.
And a lot of this energy will be dark,
Yeah.
and wanting to be expressed
Yeah.
perhaps in the way that Harry Potter has been expressed.
Harry Potter has matured with her writing. So when he started as a little boy, it was kind of innocent wizardry, and it's developed into something much more dark, much darker, and much more sophisticated, and much more in depth, and much more enigmatic and interesting, perhaps.
Mars, as the ruler of the ascendant, disposits in Librelin, the sign of books and literature.
Well, it does.
And-
Yes. You see, we would say exoterically Pluto's the ruler of Scorpio.
Well, that
but
as well.
Mars is the old ruler, definitely.
That's interesting, though, that she should find it wanting to write with that Mars in Libra. It's interesting.
See, what I said before bears some examination, because we talked about that T-square as being, it's her detailed creation of fantasy, or from fantasy or imagination, born out of poverty. Now, we do know, and it's famously known, that she wrote because she needed money. And so that she's used her imagination and her darkest fears to almost banish her poverty. So she's banished both her fears, perhaps, and her poverty by creating Harry Potter, who is tremendously successful.
Yes, Neptune in Scorpio is very imaginative.
It's in the first house. Neptune in Scorpio, she'd have to be involved in forensics or some kind of detective work or something. If she didn't write Harry Potter, she'd probably write crime or something.
And look at that stellium of planets in Virgo. It's almost as if the details of her imaginative array of characters is there already in her psyche, just to be expressed.
It is. I mean, it is. We've got Uranus next to her Venus, which again talks about rejection stuff in her own personal life. And Uranus is also with Pluto. So we've got Venus, we've got Mercury at 0 degrees Virgo, then we've got Venus, we've got Pluto, we've got Uranus and the Moon all in Virgo. And in an equal house chart, the 11th house has Venus, Pluto, Uranus, and the Moon in it. So you can cherry pick from that. I mean, that's a rich tapestry of detail and things that have to be almost ironed out here.
There's a lot of service work.
Yeah, there is.
Service to the public
Virgo.
through her writing with that Virgo in the midheaven. But
the Neptune in the first, though, is trine Saturn in the 5th retrograde, isn't it? Which I see, again, the trines are easy. Trines are what people find easy, and you don't, it just kind of happens, and sometimes too easily. It's too easy to just do something almost. You know, it's in other words, it's not a challenge. It's something that you just slide into because it's of your own bent.
Yes.
And that would talk about dealing with, again, with fear of death or fear of loss, because Saturn in Pisces is this in the 5th house. It would be honouring the dead as well, and honouring posterity.
It's interesting to note, Moon in Virgo, with that stellium of planets in Virgo, I've put here, may turn to Marian mysteries at some point.
To what mysteries?
The Marian mysteries. You know, of the Holy Mother Virgin Mary.
Oh, yeah,
The Marian mysteries are very much Virgo and the Moon. And she maybe
it's very much goddess stuff.
Yeah, it is. Maybe a closet Catholic. I don't know. I don't know whether she is, but that sort of iconography will appeal to her, perhaps her in later years. I've put here also, Lynn, with the T-square of Moon opposition Saturn square to Jupiter.
Yeah.
Peccadillos, complaints of little things that are wearing in opposition to a very depressive Saturn in Pisces.
And Scorpio rising is often depressive, especially in first decanate, and this is first decanate.
She has sorrowed a lot on her own.
She has. The Neptune in the first would show that.
And that may be linked to some of her well documented that her mother suffered for a long time with, I think it was multiple sclerosis, after a 10-year endurance.
Well, you see,
and that would be indicative of that.
Well, you see, the Sun in Leo in the 10th house here, in an equal house, is square to Neptune in the 1st. Now, Sun square Neptune is to do with having to dig deeper for any success, having to dig deeper for any success, having to struggle to retain. Let me just talk about Scorpio rising, because it said that Scorpio rising people struggle and they don't know when to stop struggling or fighting, and that this struggle is often then becomes their greatest virtue, because it takes them farther than other people would normally go. But Scorpio rising has to research, it has to dig, it has to go deeper into anything it undertakes. It has to go very deep, and the Neptune aids it. So the Neptune escapes into the depths of it, on the intensity.
Yes, it's profound, isn't it?
Profound. It escapes into that chosen study. So what would be on first glance a dark heart, Leo Sun, is to do with the heart. Rising Scorpio is to do with the darkness. So we could see almost dark heart being transformed in one lifetime by a particular study. Now, she is a writer, but I mean, lots of people are writers, and it's almost like a secondary to something else that they do. So it would be interesting to know if she firstly formulated an interest for the occult itself, or for the supernatural, for magical things, or whether as a writer she thought, well, this is a really good thing to write about now. I personally think it's the former, because nobody else was doing it, and she did it, and she hit on this very winning formula. But JK Rowling is one of these people whose personality and accomplishments are absolutely tailor-made to her chart.
Yes, she's very brooding, isn't she? That Neptune in Scorpio in the 1st, I've put here a sensitive and brooding personality with
she looks
profundity.
Anything but
she does. Introversion is likely with mediumistic feelings.
Mediumistic feelings.
Intuitive and imaginative, falls easily into domesticity and withdraws a lot. With that Neptune
she's
there.
very, very, very private. I think she's only just started to kind of talk about who she is, and she's safe to do so because she's, if you like, made her mark, and she's always going to be successful now, even if she never writes again.
There's a lot of fifth ray energies there of analysis and knowledge in the Virgo stellium, and there's a streak of devotion as well. But that Mars in Libra can be very violent as well.
Can it?
Yeah,
it
Mars
can be
can
very
break Mars. Law breaking and breaking the peace as well. Mars in Libra. It doesn't mean to say that she's like that, but there'll be elements of that Martian energy which may come out.
I think
through other people.
Yeah, I think Harry Potter himself, as a little character, as an archetype, is seen by the Mercury in the 10th house here. I think he is almost her Mercury.
He's a champion, isn't he? Yeah,
but he's a little champion. He's a little, in Virgo, he's a little fusspot in a way.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
But Virgo 0 degrees, a Mercury 0 degrees in any chart shows somebody who can kind of go between and not that certain. However, the rest of the planets in Virgo make her very detailed and very emphatic. But I think Harry himself is shown by the natal positioning of Mercury. But I think JK is, I think you can see her in the chart. Do you know what I mean? It's not some people, you look at their charts, Peter, and you think, what, is this the right chart for this person? You have to really dig to find the person in relation to the chart. But JK is one of these people who her chart just speaks for her.
Yes, this Moon and Saturn opposition, to me, encapsulates the whole mythology of Harry Potter, of the forces of darkness and light. And I think this goes back to her previous, not so good. To her previous lives of religious tolerance and intolerance.
I think that this point about previous lives of religious rigidity.
The forces of light and dark.
I think it's very interesting. I think it's about being cloistered. And many of her works, I mean, if you look at this school that they all in, Hogwarts, whatever it's called, they it's a cloistered place. It's
yes.
a place of hallowed, cloistered, semi-sinisterism.
Yes.
And this is something she recalls or remembers. But she escapes into it by courtesy of the Neptune Scorpio, which will incline itself to dark woodland places and caves and things of that sort. And this is what I mean. This chart is tailor-made for her.
I've also put here, it's a compound complex of this Saturn in Pisces. I have done those things I ought not to have done and left undone those things I should have done. So this again goes back to previous lives and religious karma. Kneels to pray to the Virgin Mary. That's Saturn retrograde in Pisces, opposite the Moon in Virgo.
Or perhaps I would add a caveat to that and say, if it's not the Virgin Mary, then it's some sort of goddess figure.
Yes.
Goddess archetype.
Yes, a Marian mystery.
Because the Virgin Mary is but one of many goddesses, unless you are a very conforming Catholic or Roman Catholic or something. She's just one of many goddesses. But definitely JK Rowling has about her that service almost to something higher.
But that Saturn in Pisces, Lynn, acts like a gravity, a weight for the whole of the rest of the chart.
It does. It's a singleton.
And there's a lot of
Pisces
sorrow there. Sorrow from previous lives, I think.
Yeah, which is why she's driven to write, which a lot of writers are, for that reason, driven to write. I mean, I hasten to add here at this point in the pod, we don't deal with the progressive chart. When we do charts individually for people, we do a progress chart, we talk about where the planets are now, how the transiting planets are affected, and it's much more in depth. And all we're doing now is covering the original natal chart of the person, and because that's all we, otherwise we'd go on sort of all afternoon. So thank you very much for joining us, and if you want to hear more of our astrological services, please visit perceptivity.co.uk
or go into the link chart, Peter Wakefield.
LinkedIn Peter Wakefield at LinkedIn, and please join us again for our next celebrity pod.